Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you details of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the issue of coal availability. Now, coal is the most important and abundant fossil fuel in India. It accounts for 55% of the country's energy need. Now, the country's industrial heritage was built upon indigenous coal. Hard coal deposits spread over 27 major coalfields are mainly confined to eastern and south central parts of the country. In the recent period, coal sector in India has grappled with demand-supply imbalances for a variety of reasons. Sharp rise in power demand, supply disruptions caused by extended monsoon, and reduction in imports on the back of steep rise of international prices as well. The government has recently informed the parliament that there is no shortage of coal in the country, and Coal India Ltd has also said that it does not foresee any shortage of dry fuel for power producers till March 2022, as it is focusing on ramping up production to secure a stock of approximately 70 million tonne by the end of current fiscal. Now, in this episode, we will discuss and analyze all aspects of this issue. We'll try and understand various complexities involved here as well. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Mr. Vinod Kumar Tiwari, who is here with us in the studio. He's Additional Secretary in the Ministry of Coal with the Government of India. We're also joined by two more panelists. Mr. Naveen Munjal is with us. He's Director, Business Development and Commercial with Prava Energy. And Dr. Pradipto Ghosh from TERI. He's a distinguished fellow at TERI. He's also joining us. Welcome, all of you gentlemen, to Sansad Television. Let me begin with you, Mr. Tiwari, straight away. And let's first start by understanding and addressing the basic question. That is the situation of coal supply and production in India. Where do we stand?
Country is consuming roughly about 970 million tonne a year and producing roughly about 730 million tonne a year. There is a gap, and gap largely consists of A, high-grade coal, B, the coking coal, and both are not found in India. So we are importing roughly about 250 million tonne a year. Of this, if we further analyze at the granular level, we will find roughly about 120 million tonne of thermal coal can be replaced by domestic coal. Although the calorific value being different, the quantity required of domestic variety will be little higher than 120. And we are geared up to that. We had already planned a substitution of these imports by the year 2024. But God sent this opportunity sooner than expected. And we have availed of it. And we are proud of it.
Okay, so what you're saying here is that there is no shortage, as the government said in the parliament, but there are various ways to look at it, and in the long term as well as in the short term, there are steps which are being taken to ensure that power producers and those who consume, coal do not have that shortfall.
Yeah, we would like to assure them that there has not been a coal shortage, nor will there be in future. Coal India is the major producer. Of the 730, it last year produced roughly about 600 million tonne. This year it is geared up to produce 650 million tonne. And the partner company is Singareni Coalfield Limited. It is contributing roughly about 65 million tonne. And rest comes from the captive coal mines that we have allocated. So all of them are geared up for a ramp up in their production. Coal India is targeting by the year 2024, it will reach 1 billion tonne. Singareni will try to reach 100 million tonne. And the captive and commercial blocks that we have allocated will be contributing close to 200. So it wipes out the import.
Okay.
Even if we have an increased demand, we would be able to meet it from domestic sources.
Okay, okay. So that explains the scenario situation there, as you're pointing out, Mr. Tiwari. Let me bring in the other two panelists as well. And let's first start with the industry perspective here. Mr. Munjal, your view there on the overall demand-supply situation of coal in India. And as Mr. Tiwari is pointing out, from the government's point of view, that all steps being taken, there is no shortage.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Dahiya. We'd like to obviously echo Mr. Tiwari's comments that shortages have really not happened. Although I must hasten to add that certainly our plant has had to face outages due to coal. But again, I don't think there are too many plants which have had to do that. But generally, given the multiple issues that happened over the last few months, there have been a few scares, and clearly we've had to, just about scrape the bottom insofar as coal is concerned. We've had international coal prices skyrocket on the back of China's demand and on the back of issues with Indonesian mining due to rains and the production cuts in Australia. Similarly, the surge in demand post-COVID was not really anticipated. So multiplicity of factors have contributed to the recent shortages that were reported in the press. But I believe things are getting back to normal.
Okay.
Although we could certainly, hopefully, do better going forward.
Okay, okay. We'll come to other aspects there as well. But Dr. Ghosh, your views initially on the entire, the coal crisis, which was being talked about, but Mr. Tiwari is, and the government has clearly pointed out, as far as the ground reality is concerned, there is no shortage.
Well, I sincerely hope that Mr. Tiwari is right. But in the short term, there was certainly an apprehension that some power plants would run out of coal. And the reasons for that are several. They have to do with the freak weather that we had in Southeast Asia, as a result of which certain coal mines in Indonesia were flooded, I believe, and they could not sort of deliver the coal that had been contracted, and global coal prices shot very high because of these disruptions. Second, a similar thing happened with some of the Indian open cast coal mines, as a result of which some supplies from Coal India were disrupted. And third, that some of the private companies which had bid and received leases for coal mines, for private operation of coal mines, so they had actually not started working in the mines. They had preferred to import the coal, mainly from Indonesia. And the lease agreements apparently did not have a use it or lose it clause. So with the result that when this crisis happened, these companies could not actually fall back on their leased mines because they had not worked in. There were no staff in place, no managers in place, the machinery was not in place. So it was very difficult for them to quickly ramp up the production. And maybe Mr. Munjal can throw more light on this aspect, but I believe this was a contributory factor. In any case, these were, I think, some relatively short-term issues. An immediate crisis was averted, I think, by Coal India ramping up production. And going forward, I hope that Mr. Tiwari's projections are right. I would, however, in the longer term, inject a note of caution, and that is that, you see, we have very ambitious plans for deployment of renewables, and much of the renewables will actually displace coal thermal power. And so we need to be clear that in the process of penetration of renewables into the grid, we do not cause demand-supply mismatch going forward, and that this phasing in of renewable power and maybe leveling off and maybe over a period of time phasing down of coal thermal power is done in a very planned and calibrated manner.
Okay, okay, that's a very important point on which you concluded your response there, Dr. Ghosh, and I'd like to bring that to Mr. Vinod Tiwari. Mr. Tiwari, this striking this balance between our energy needs, utilization of fossil fuels, and the focus on cleaner energy as well, renewable energy, as have been commitments which have been made by India at the global stage also in COP26. So, as Dr. Ghosh is saying that, how do we plan to move ahead in phasing in renewable energy and phasing out the fossil fuels on which we've been dependent for all these decades now?
We look, first of all, let me very candidly admit, in the coal sector, we are very clear this is a finite source. It's one of the most polluting sources. It will be out. It has to be. When and the pace of phasing down, phasing out is yet to be determined.
Okay.
And before we move on to the downward path of the graph, let us be clear, when are we going to peak?
Okay.
Peaking wings, in our assessment, will come sometime between 2040 and 2045. By that time, India's energy needs would have grown exponentially. Agreed, renewable energy will be injected in greater quantum, but till we get that technology of storage, we will have to, for the grid stability, for the off-peak, peak demand, everything, thermal has to have a base capacity. I don't foresee a quantum jump in the installed capacity of which we monitor to reaching something like 500 gigawatt. No, we are at 210. We might reach barely 300, maybe 400, not beyond that. That we are very clear. But what we have seen during this situation, we don't call it crisis, because this was an opportunity which came earlier than anticipated. PLF of installed plants is bound to go up, which is hovering at around 55%. We anticipate will reach at 85%. Maybe we don't add new capacities, but capacity already available will be better
Utilized, optimum utilization.
Optimum utilization. One. Second part, net zero doesn't mean no emission. So coal companies are also working hard to reduce their emission from the mining operation. Consumption happens elsewhere. Let them tackle that. But in the coal sector, we are very, very clear that if we reduce our emission from mining operations, we will be damaging the environment less than what we did before.
Okay.
I'm very clear, we will not become good.
So the mitigating efforts.
Mitigating effort. In that, we have removed the first mile travel by road of the coal. We have put a target of all the 4 million ton per annum producing mines switch over completely to the dispatch of coal up to the railway siding by conveyor belt and loading by silo, which is computerized. A, it improves the efficiency. B, it totally eliminates the road transport related emission, dust and traffic congestion and accidents. And it reduces the turnaround time of railway wagons. And it gives us greater accuracy.
Okay.
As also the coal size of the boulder gets reduced to 100 mm. That's what the thermal power plants demand.
Okay.
That is one. Two, going beyond the mandated requirement of environment protection, ameliorative measures, we are encouraging them to go beyond and do more plantation.
Okay.
A lot of land is available which is being repurposed. So we have something like 56,000 hectares have already been planted up by Coal India.
Okay.
And we have mandated them to do 2,000 more. This is in addition to the compensatory afforestation that is done for the forest land diversion, and also in addition to payment of net present values that we pay to the Kempa fund.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we are also working on energy efficiencies. We are also working towards reducing the diesel consumption, switching over to LNG in our HEMM, heavy earth moving machinery operations. So all this will ultimately.
So what you're saying is that these mitigating efforts will contribute a lot in terms of, bringing down those emission levels when you're talking about the
Yes.
coal producer, that is the Coal India Ltd or the other companies involved there as well. Let me bring in, Mr. Munjal here again. Mr. Munjal, as Mr. Binod Tiwari was pointing out, that the peak period will be achieved somewhere around 2040 or 2045 when we're talking about the peak of use of thermal power. And of course, there's nothing stopping now the entry of renewable energy. That's the future. Now, if I'm not wrong, your company itself is also seemingly not very interested in investing more in thermal energy or thermal power plants. So how do you see, from industry's perspective, that changeover period or the transition? How do we move ahead?
Yeah, I think what Mr. Tiwari said was absolutely on point. We are yet to see the peak of coal, and let's recognize that in today, as at today, we are in terms of energy terms, renewable energy only contributes to about 10% of the total energy requirements in India, power. So for us to get to even 50%, when we know that the plant load factors for renewable energy tend to be very, very low, typically in the 20s, we are really talking about a longish period of time. And I couldn't agree more with Mr. Tiwari that this will be many, many years from now. Unfortunately, what is also happening at the same time is that as a company, of course, we are very clear we are not going to be building any more coal-based or thermal capacity. We are largely at this point in time a renewable company, and our plant in Haryana is just one of the assets that we have there. But if you look at it from the industry perspective, there is virtually no addition happening on the thermal side. And unfortunately, with a lot of plants, more than half the installed capacity of coal is of subcritical technology, which will need to be phased out over a period of time. We could potentially be looking at some kind of serious gap, if storage doesn't really happen in the way it is expected.
Okay.
Or we don't get some new technology based on green hydrogen. But clearly, there are very, very severe issues vis-a-vis industry, and it will be a tightrope walk going forward.
Okay. Before I go to Dr. Ghosh, Mr. Tiwari, addressing that last point which Mr. Munjal made, and that seemed to be very important and interesting as well. No new capacity is being added, something which you were also referring to. The idea here is to make optimum utilization of the existing capacity as well. But when we're talking about the transition period, newer technologies would be required, and in that particular period, a shortage or a shortfall in the supply might derail all the plans.
No, I mean, we have done our mathematics. By 2030, we are anticipating something like 1600 to 1700 million ton India will require coal. We have already put Coal India on a path to achieve 1000 million ton by the year 2024. By 2030, it will add more. We have already allocated something like 200 million ton per year capacity to captives. And recently we allowed them, they were end-use plant specific, we allowed them 50% of their annual production to be sold in the market. We amended our rule, we opened up.
Okay.
They are also contributing. And through commercial mining, we have so far auctioned off something like 250 million ton per annum producing mines.
Okay.
Another 250 are in pipeline. And their gestation period has generally been long. Through a mechanism with the state governments, we are trying to help early operationalization of those mines. So I am pretty sure if the demand doesn't tank, country will be ready to produce and supply up to 1700 million ton per annum.
Okay.
And one more assurance, India has enough of reserves. We have not reached 1 billion ton production a year. We got 150 billion ton reserve.
That's a huge amount.
So that's a huge amount. If you keep producing 1 billion ton a year, it will last you 150 years.
Okay.
And we are adding more by exploring more. There is an investment going on in coal block explorations, although we have now started applying filters that high density forest areas be left out. Good water reserves, wherever you have hydrology going to be affected by coal mining, simply don't make a block.
Okay. So that's a huge figure. You talk about the reserves which we have. Hopefully, we'll not have to,
Tap all of it.
tap on those reserves and worry about them being running out because the renewable energy, the way the technology is coming in, and the avenues of renewable energy are being looked at. Dr. Ghosh, again, coming back to you, for a concluding comment there before we bring this to an end. The transition which we are talking about here and various factors involved, and those are very crucial factors. From your view, how do you see that transition happening, and which aspects need to be focused upon more in the coming years, or perhaps a decade or two, because the peak for thermal power plants or the coal based power will be somewhere around 2040, 2050. That should give us enough time to build on our renewable energy capacities as well.
Well, I hope that this projection of 2040 to 2045 for peaking turns out to be correct. The fact of the matter is that in the past, the projections of energy demand on the basis of which investments were made were actually not consistent with the demand patterns as eventually emerged. And this was for two reasons. First, because the GDP growth rates made in these assumptions of projections did not quite pan out for a variety of reasons, not necessarily having to do with domestic policy.
Okay.
The second is that the assumed elasticity of energy demand with GDP, it turned out to be smaller, significantly smaller than what was assumed. So my own suggestion is that we should prepare these action plans going forward.
Okay.
But be very careful, that detail them to the plant level, but also, periodically revise them to take into account the changes in demand, the changes in emerging technology, costs, and so on.
Okay.
So, it has to be a continuous exercise, and some competent technical body has to be tasked with undertaking this continuing exercise.
Okay.
Because what we cannot afford is a breakdown of the energy system and a wide mismatch between supply and demand.
Okay. Okay.
At any point.
Okay, there it is. Thank you so much, Dr. Pradipta Ghosh, Mr. Munjal, as well as Mr. Vinod Tiwari, for sharing your views and input with us. And our viewers there, as well as our experts, were pointing out this is the ground situation when we're talking about the availability of coal and the coal-based energy or power supply or the power demand there as well. Various aspects in terms of when we're trying to peek into the future. Of course, the future is all about renewable energy, but the transition will have to be carefully maneuvered through, and those aspects which our experts were pointing out will have to be taken into consideration. We'll come back again tomorrow with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.